Aha. Sorry about that. I'm here. Okay. So what was going on there? Well, what was going on was someone had unplugged the microphone and plugged it in somewhere else and didn't bother to mention it to anyone. So, yeah, I am here. Really, I am here. And all that, I don't know what you heard of that or what any of that came across, but any strange sounds you heard were me trying to plug myself back in, or trying to A, identify the problem, and then B, rectify it. And so I believe I have done so. And I apologize for the lack of professionalism displayed there, but it never occurred to me that someone would unplug the microphone. You know what I mean? Just seems like an odd thing to do. So, be that as it may, I think I know why that was done. I'm not going to tell you, but I think I know why. And it makes sense. But anyway, okay, sorry. It's all technical stuff. It has nothing to do with you. Let me begin again. Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. Whose views are these? Well, funny that you should ask. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean me, because I'm here by myself. But if I happen to read a news article or an opinion piece or something like that, you will be hearing views that are not necessarily mine. They are those of the authors of the pieces that I happen to read. And so I wanted to make that point just in case that is necessary to clarify, because, you know, I don't always read things that I agree with. I sometimes read them in order to demonstrate a particular point of view that is floating around out there, or something like that. So anyway, yes. So now that I'm completely thrown off and confused by the technical difficulties involved, I'm back and able to speak to you. So anyway, hi there. There's someone wandering around in here, getting ready. He's going. Oh, I see. Yeah, I discovered that partway through the opening introduction of the show. Anyway, yeah. So, as I was saying, I don't know what I was saying. Oh, I know what I was going to say, was that it's very hot out today. Very hot. But still not particularly humid, so it's still bearable as long as you can stay in the shade or in a place where a breeze touches your skin or something like that. You can remain alive. But if you are not so fortunate and you're stuck in a spot where the sun is beating down on you, woe betide. So if I were you, and I am not, obviously, but if I were, I would try to stay out of the sun, if at all possible. And my deepest sympathies and condolences go to anybody who has a job where they're like up on a roof, or they're otherwise stuck, out in a place where the sun is beating down on them, because it is brutal out there. So, having said all of that, and having thoroughly confused myself and been confused by my situation, I think I can begin the show with some semblance of a, calm, professional demeanor. I'm not sure, but I'll try. So anyway, as you may have noticed, CU Immigration hasn't been on the air the last couple of weeks. Well, why is that? I don't really have too many excuses. I have lots of excuses, but nothing that I think is really justifies my not being here other than school's on break, so I can't get guests because they're all, on break and they're all traveling around and doing things. So if you're a student, you're gone, obviously, because why would you still be here when you don't have to be? If you're a professor or somebody like that, you're gone because, hey, you don't have to be here. So everybody's gone. And that just leaves me, of course, in my usual, I never go anywhere. And so I haven't had any guests, and I've had lots and lots of other things to do. So I just, it's been more convenient, let's put it that way, to not show up here and do the show. And I apologize for that, because it's confusing to try to listen to a radio show and then go, oh, wait, it's not on. What's going on? So anyway, I felt compelled to come in tonight and try to do a show anyway. The other point, though, which I suppose bears mentioning, is that, as we've talked about it on several shows recently, the current administration is really messed up. And so while they're talking about doing things with immigration, and things are happening sort of behind the scenes, basically they don't seem to be able to get it together to really do anything particular. So yeah, there are some more people being deported and rounded up, and the amount of ability people have to challenge their detention or their removal is limited. There are all sorts of things going on, but it's just sort of random and behind the scenes. One can only imagine how awful things would be if the current administration were in any way competent or weren't completely distracted by, say, accusations of colluding with a foreign power in order to get elected, and a few things like that, So it's interesting in a very sad way, I guess you might say, to note how there's a silver lining to the dark cloud that is the Trump administration, and that is that they are like ridiculously incompetent. It's like the Three Stooges of political groups, if I can call them that. It's very sad and pathetic. So, but it does make it a little difficult, because I can remember, it seems like not that long ago, when there were very clear-cut, sides to everything. There was the Republicans had this sort of general view, and there were, varying degrees of intensity of those views within the party, but there was a general kind of view in the Republican Party about immigrants and immigration, and then the Democrats had their own view, and then independents had another one. There were these kind of distinct camps, and they were all operating within a certain range, kind of a predictable range, and you could just sort of see which way things were going, and you could watch when things were about to happen or that weren't happening, and you could sort of guess what was coming next. And then with the last election, everything just blew out of the water like a giant bomb, and things went flying in every direction, and it's just completely up for grabs. So it's very difficult for would-be pundits like myself to make any kind of reasonable statements about the state of immigration right now, because it's so confusing. You have what they're trying to do versus what they're getting done versus what other people want to happen versus what is actually happening, and it's a big mess. So it has made it difficult for me anyway, I don't know about anyone else, to have any kind of like definitive statements about things. So I'm generally speaking, I think I'm just going to read some articles here that caught my eye and kind of give you my take on them, and see if maybe by the end of the show we can sort of come up with a general view of the state of immigration here in the U.S. and around the world, because it's it's muddled. It's confusing. So the first thing I thought I would read is this article entitled Up to 245 People Missing After 2 Mediterranean Shipwrecks. So this sort of reminds us of how desperate things are over in Europe. You remember for a while it was like nonstop news about people coming to Greece and Italy, and migrants trying to move their way around Europe and various countries, setting up checkpoints and refusing entry and all these different things. And it seemed like there was a very distinct situation over there, and then it kind of died away in a weird way. I don't know if migration slacked off or people started talking about something else and they didn't talk about that as much. I'm not sure, but anyway, this harkens back to the bad old days of just last year, and it reads as follows. 2 wrecks of migrant ships in the Mediterranean have claimed as many as 245 lives, including those of at least 5 children, according to survivor accounts given to UN agencies and authorities in Sicily, where dozens of rescued migrants were taken. Survivors of one wreck, some of them hospitalized in Polazzo, Italy, where they were being treated for hypothermia and exhaustion, told authorities who interviewed them that their traffickers had crammed some 130 to 140 people, apparently all from Central African countries, into a motorized rubber dinghy designed to hold at most 20 people. Let me restate that so you can get a sense of how overcrowded that is. 130 to 140 people in a rubber boat, a dinghy, designed to hold at most 20 people. Naturally enough, the dinghy started deflating on one end. The passengers quickly shifted their positions in the boat, and the craft tipped over, authorities said, based on numerous survivors' descriptions. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity since the shipwreck is being investigated. The dinghy wasn't equipped with any distress signaling equipment. The 50 or so survivors clung for hours to the wreckage of the dinghy until they were spotted by a patrol plane and rescued by a Danish cargo ship, which was dispatched to their aid by the Italian Coast Guard, which coordinates rescue operations. One survivor is a Nigerian woman whose 5-month-old baby died. The infant's corpse was one of the few bodies so far recovered. Police in Sicily said in a statement that many of the survivors recounted that among the 80 or so who drowned was one of the smugglers who had been steering the boat. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency said in Geneva, where it is headquartered, that one of its partner agencies, the International Medical Corps, reported a shipwreck on Sunday off the Libyan coast in which 163 people are missing and feared dead. The UN agency said 1 woman and 6 men were rescued by the Libyan Coast Guard. Many of those who braved the risky central Mediterranean route between Libya and Italy are migrants from Africa seeking to flee from conflicts, political persecution at home, or to find better economic opportunities in Europe. Overall, UNHCR said Tuesday that more than 1,300 people have disappeared and are believed to have died this year while crossing the Mediterranean from North Africa to Italy, while some 43,000 migrants and asylum seekers reached Italy. The International Organization for Migration, in separate remarks, gave a lower estimate of the total number of migrants' lives lost, 190 in the 2 shipwrecks. It estimated about 80 people died from the sinking of the dinghy off Italy and at least 113 following the shipwreck off the coast near Az-Zawiya, Libya. IOM said its Rome branch, meanwhile, was reporting operations to help 6,612 people rescued from a dozen locations off Italy since Friday. IOM spokesman Joel Millman feared the better weather has been feeding the Mediterranean's traditional summer migration surge. There is normally pent-up demand, Millman said. The summer tends to be very, very busy because sea conditions are better. And in Spain, on Tuesday, officials said about 300 migrants tried to scramble across the 6-meter, 20-foot border fence separating Spain's North African enclave of Melilla from Morocco, with many throwing stones and other objects at police. Melilla's Interior Ministry said most of the migrants were pushed back by Spanish and Moroccan police, but about 100 managed to enter the city. It took 3 officers and 3 migrants. It said 3 officers and 3 migrants were treated for injuries. Many of the thousands of economic migrants or refugees who have been brought to Italy after rescue at sea told authorities that they spent months in inhumane detention facilities in Libya, often suffering torture, sexual abuse, or labor exploitation before the smugglers sent them out to sea. A Rome-based IOM spokesman, Flavio Di Giacomo, said in an interview in Tuesday's La Stampa newspaper that there have been recent indications that some migrants have decided to flee the harsh conditions in Libya to return to their homelands, renouncing their dream of reaching Europe in safety, although the majority take the risk of the sea. So that's just it's terrible, but it gives you a sense of the desperation of the people and how awful the conditions are that they're fleeing in order to make them put up with that sort of thing and to continue to try despite all the horrible things that keep happening to them along the way. So the situation in Europe is not much better, and maybe when I say it seems to have died down a bit, it's because the weather hasn't been good and people haven't been trying to make that crossing. I don't know, but that's one thing that's going on right now. And sadly, I think we can probably look for more stories like that in the near future as people try to make that crossing and get over to Europe. So anyway, let's see what's going on in the U.S. Okay, so the big immigration news for a while now has been the so-called travel ban, and its various ups and downs in the courts as people try to, make some sense of it and decide if there's any potential legality to it at all, and how the court should react to it. So this is the latest news, and it's entitled "Another Appeals Court Rules Against Trump's Revised Immigration Ban." So another U.S. appeals court stomped on President Donald Trump's revised immigration ban Monday, saying the administration violated federal immigration law and failed to provide a valid reason for keeping people from 6 mostly Muslim nations from coming to the country. The decision... sorry, I have to clean my glasses here quickly. Much better. The decision by a unanimous 3-judge panel of the San Francisco-based 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals helps keep the immigration ban blocked and deals Trump a second big legal defeat on the policy in less than 3 weeks. The administration has appealed another ruling against the ban to the Supreme Court, which is likely to consider the cases in tandem. The White House said it is confident the High Court will uphold Trump's executive order. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Virginia last month cited the president's campaign statements calling for a, quote, total and complete shutdown, end quote, on Muslims entering the U.S. as evidence that the 90-day ban was unconstitutionally steeped in animus and directed at a single religious group rather than necessary for national security. The Ninth Circuit, which heard arguments in Seattle last month in Hawaii's challenge to the ban, found no need to analyze Trump's campaign statements. It ruled based on immigration law, not the Constitution. Quote, immigration, even for the president, is not a one-person show. the judges said, adding, national security is not a talismanic incantation that once invoked can support any and all exercise of executive power. I like that. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the Justice Department, will continue to seek further review by the Supreme Court. This is from Sessions. The executive branch is entrusted with the responsibility to keep the country safe under Article 2 of the Constitution. Unfortunately, this injunction prevents the president from fully carrying out his Article 2 duties and has a chilling effect on security operations overall. Blah, blah. Judges Michael Hawkins, Ronald Gould, and Richard Paez, all appointed by President Bill Clinton, said the immigration ban violated immigration law by discriminating against people based on their nationality when it comes to issuing visas and by failing to demonstrate that their entry would hurt American interests. The president's order did not tie citizens of Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen to terrorist organizations or identify them as contributors to active conflict, the court said. It also did not provide any link between their nationality and their propensity to commit terrorism. In short, the order does not provide a rationale explaining why permitting entry of nationals from the 6 designated countries under current protocols would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, the ruling said. The judges pointed to a June 6 tweet by Trump saying the order was aimed at dangerous countries that helped demonstrate that he was not assessing whether the roughly 180 million citizens of the 6 countries had ties to terrorism, they said. Because of the conflict with immigration law, the judges said they didn't need to consider whether it also violated the Constitution's prohibition on the government favoring or disfavoring any religion. The Fourth Circuit found the policy unconstitutional on that basis. The White House, naturally enough, predicted a win at the Supreme Court. Frankly, I think any lawyer worth their salt 100% agrees that the president's fully within his rights and his responsibilities to do what is necessary to protect the country, spokesman Sean Spicer said. Trump's suspension of the U.S. refugee program also remains blocked. The Ninth Circuit said he was required to consult with Congress in setting the number of refugees allowed into the country in a given year, and that he could not decrease it mid-year. The refugee program is not at issue in the Fourth Circuit case. Hawaii Attorney General Douglas Chin said the new ruling proved that our system of checks and balances, enshrined in the Constitution for more than 225 years, remains in place. Trump issued his initial immigration ban on a Friday in late January, bringing chaos and protests to airports around the country. A Seattle judge blocked its enforcement nationwide in response to a lawsuit by Washington State, a decision that was unanimously upheld by a different 3-judge Ninth Circuit panel. The president then rewrote his executive order rather than appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court at that time. The new version, designed to better withstand legal scrutiny, named 6 countries instead of 7, dropping Iraq, and spelled out more of a national security rationale. It also listed some reasons that travelers from those nations might be granted waivers, allowing them into the U.S. despite the policy. Several states and civil rights groups also challenged the revised ban, saying it remained rooted in discrimination and exceeded the president's authority. In March, U.S. District Judge Derek Watson in Hawaii blocked the new version from taking effect, citing what he called significant and unrebutted evidence of religious animus in Trump's campaign statements. The Ninth Circuit on Monday narrowed Watson's ruling in some minor ways, allowing the administration to conduct an internal review of its vetting procedures for refugees and visa applicants. Okay. So a couple of weird things about, this doesn't surprise me, but a couple of weird things about the ban is it was supposed to last for 90 days. So that'd be January, February, March. It's now June, and so had it gone into effect and everybody left it alone, it would have ended before now. And supposedly, again, the rationale behind the ban was we need to stop all these people coming in so we have time to figure out new ways of vetting them and figuring out who's who, because apparently we had no idea who was coming into this country. We were just like, hey, the door's open, come on in, whoever you are, doesn't matter, we don't know. At least that was the rhetoric. And so we needed this 90-day pause in order to figure things out. Literally, those were the words used, figure things out, figure this thing out. So more than 90 days has come and gone. The ban has been banned or, put on hold or whatever you have it. There have been no terrorist attacks. Nothing has happened. And presumably the powers that be have had more than enough time to review their procedures so that they can now implement those procedures, put their new checks into place, and we should be fine. But instead, they're appealing it to the Supreme Court as if the only way they can figure out what's going on, as they have said on a number of occasions, we don't know what's going on. The only way they can figure out what's going on is if this ban is in place. It doesn't make any sense. It isn't even remotely logical anymore. And so it's really interesting. I'll be interested to see what the Supreme Court says. Here's an article. I'll read this really quickly, entitled Decision Time at the Supreme Court. Rulings expected soon on religion, free speech, and immigration. This is from LA Times. So, it's decision time at the Supreme Court as the justices prepare to hand down the final rulings of their current term by the end of this month. They are due to rule in 21 cases, including disputes over religion, free speech, and immigration that could have broad significance. This year's term has been quieter than normal. It began in the fall when 8 justices were waiting for the presidential election to decide who would fill the seat left vacant by the death of Antonin Scalia. New Justice Neil M. Gorsuch arrived in mid-April in time to hear about a dozen cases. Most of this year's docket was taken up with cases that asked the justices to clarify the law, not settle a highly contentious issue. Before their summer recess, the justices are also expected to act on several pending appeals. Lawyers for President Trump want the court to issue an order putting into effect his scaled-down foreign travel ban, and then to grant review in the fall of the appeals court ruling that declared it unconstitutional. The justices have also spent weeks considering appeals in 3 cases that could lead to major rulings if they are granted review for the fall. One involves a Colorado baker who turned away a gay couple's request for a wedding cake. At issue is a clash between religious rights and a state's anti-discrimination law. The other 2 cases test the reach of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. The court is also expected to take up a major case of partisan gerrymandering from Wisconsin, which could yield early next year an important ruling on political power. Here are notable cases due to be decided this month. Church schools. Must a state offer equal funds to church schools if other private groups may qualify? A seemingly small dispute over the playground at a Lutheran day center in Missouri could trigger a major shift in church-state law.